The data center industry is moving faster than ever, and behind the scenes, some seriously smart people are making it all happen. Welcome to the Inside Data Center podcast, where we dive into the stories, insights, and innovations driving real change across the industry. From hyperscale campuses to game-changing technologies, we're talking to the people shaping the future of digital infrastructure. Whether you live and breathe data centers or just want to understand what's powering our connected world, you're in the right place.
So we are back at Datacloud, back in Cannes, back in the sunshine, with only a slight delay to power this morning, which seemed like a pretty relevant conversation there.
Seeing how many umbrellas we can get to cover us, cool us.
Yeah, exactly. The theme of power and cooling. So we are here with Chris Pennington, Director Energy and Sustainability at Iron Mountain, and Afonso Salema, CEO of Exus Digital. Appreciate your time, guys. Massively so. So let's get into it.
Happy to be here.
Power.
Yeah.
Power is the big trend. Power is the thing that everybody is talking about. Are we at capacity? Or does the data center industry need to build smarter?
Ooh.
Well, I think access to power is the big challenge. And I think part of finding access to power is understanding that the paradigm we've had in the past, where we just show up, ask for this constant supply from the grid and expect to receive it, is going to leave a lot of capacity stranded on the grid. So what we see now is that there's actually lots of capacity on many grids during much of the year, but unlocking access to that means we have to be able to find ways for our data center load to be flexible. So how can we actually kind of change the shape of how we pull power from the grid to align with when capacity is available and when clean energy is available? And that's a lot of what we're focused on right now with some energy storage systems that can actually carry the load of the data center, the entire data center, for hours in order to unlock access to that stranded capacity that's there for the vast majority of the year.
Nice. Alfonso.
Well, if you recall, the first time we've spoken years ago,
Many years ago.
Which in this industry corresponds like 3 decades, we spoke about power. We spoke exactly about this power, about the power issue, and it was out of the radar for most people. As you know, I come from a power background, so I've been looking into power grids for over 20 years. And the reality is, that's a loaded question, because yes, we are at capacity. At the same time, we're not. The fact of the matter is that grids were built with the same mentality that we used on the 70s. So when you build something, everything is built for peak load, peak consumption, which leaves most of things unused. You go to a power line using EU codes, and the TSO is going to ramp up that line for 3 times your actual need. You go to a substation, the same thing happens. So the TSO, of course, they're scared. They have no incentive to optimize the grid access because all they have is punitive charges if there's a blackout. So helping the TSO, I think it's the role of the data center industry also to help the TSO on how to make better choices, how to unlock more of the power, especially given how affordability concerns are affecting all of Europe, and how data centers, and that trend is starting in the US, data centers are perceived as pushing the affordability issue, again, raising power prices to the end consumer. So unless we help the TSOs with it, we're never going to use the full potential of the grid that we have now. Now, having said that, yes, there are constraints. There are effective constraints on the power grids in Europe that needs to be tackled, but those are almost surgical. It's not. The last time I saw, there was a 300 billion plan to upgrade the European grid. That's wasted money, because instead of moving loads to where that capacity is, we're trying to force feed in locations which are already strained and shouldn't have additional capacity, because otherwise, I mean, before a data center, the biggest equipment that humankind ever produced is the power grid. And it's a living organism. So we need to see it as such, and data centers need to adapt to it in order to unlock, in order to grow. But it's a loaded question, because we can spend the entire podcast just discussing one of those.
You're absolutely right. It's a loaded question. And on that subject, let's get into kind of this idea of like innovation in power behind the meter. This is the term that everybody's talking about, using behind the meter power to overcome grid constraints. Is this really a thing here?
Oh, so I live in the U.S. It's massively a thing. Of course, we have the luxury of access to plentiful, cheap natural gas, and so the ability to use on-site power generation using natural gas, of course, to just really not only accelerate the timeline to power, but gain certainty with when you'll get power. That's really where it comes in as being added value, and it's just we're seeing it at big scale. 300, 400, 500 megawatts is not an uncommon size for an on-site generation plant that's being talked about or in design or in development. And it's a bit concerning, I think, for myself, just because it is very much a short-term solution that has potential long-term impacts. Not just environmentally, as you can imagine, from just burning natural gas, but just the financial commitments. So, as a data center operator, we don't naturally go out and invest in power generation plants, and yet these contracts, in order to bring this kind of capacity on site, are typically 10, 15, maybe 20 years in length in order to get the average cost of power down to where it's reasonable. So, it's absolutely happening. It's happening for the sake of gaining certainty with when power will be available. It is hopefully a phenomenon that we see relatively short-lived, I think, because ultimately our customers, they all want to be connected to the grid. Like, they want to be supplied by the grid for great reasons. I mean, the grid will over time become cleaner, like it is here in Europe. It'll become more affordable because of clean power. And you just don't get those advantages when you build your power yourself behind the meter with natural gas on site. So yes, it's happening. Hopefully it's a short-lived phenomenon, but only time will tell. We need access to power.
We already had on a podcast, the first podcast we recorded, about the customer and about how, what does the customer want? It's kind of the question we have to ask here, isn't it, really? Because it's okay, having that solution, but if the customer doesn't want that solution, then it won't happen.
Well, they may want it today. They may not want it 5 years from now.
Yeah, but there's also, you touched on two very relevant points. The first one is, yes, so behind the meter is a means of a bridge to power, a bridge to grid process. So there's a big pipeline of projects that need to be operating as soon as possible, and you will need that behind the meter to speed it up, because the grid timings are not the same as data center timing. But that's one solution. The other one, which is quite relevant and is becoming insanely relevant, is affordability. The affordability of AI, the sustainability of the big companies, the big AI companies, which, as you've probably seen from all the news that have been coming, they're not great, and they're not great because they're overpaying for power, they're overpaying for their location. So the TCO comes back to the forefront. So behind the meter can help on both. But you need a specific strategy. Am I using this as a bridge to grid, and then I use the grid, and then I use the same equipment I have a different use case for the long term, so that I reduce the TCO? Can I also use the grid as a complementary once I have access to it, so I can further reduce the TCO? There's so much pressure now to deploy that the TCO question has stayed on the back seat, but now it's coming full strength at the front seat, and behind the meter will be one of the solutions to push it. Now, there's a difference between US and Europe, very big one, whereby in Europe you can have both. You can have grid and behind the meter co-living. Again, that's an entire podcast, so we can work on it. But you can have both. In the US, you don't. The regulator still frowns on it, so it's hard to make that transition. They're starting to have a little bit more understanding and see the value of it, especially with initiatives of bring your own power into the data center that you're trying to build. So the US is now going towards that direction, but it's not there yet. And while in Europe, it de facto is. And probably the only way to make Europe competitive versus US is actually focus on bringing behind the meter power to lower the TCO.
But make it more sustainable with that.
Yes. Because in Europe, it's much cheaper. Renewables in Europe are much cheaper So that's the de facto enablement. Like you said, gas in the US is cheap. Gas in Europe is not.
I was going to say, like, do you think we'll see gas in Europe? Is it a viable solution in Europe?
For some hedge hours, yes. And if you provide services to the grid, yes. If you see it as your baseload solution, then you're up to a big shock.
Yeah, and yet also I agreed with you on that front. And also, if you only utilize that power plant for some peak capability, short time, like your levelized cost of energy from that plant is massive because all the capacity costs, all the grid the capacity on the gas system charges. So it's fundamentally disadvantaged to try and solve the energy challenge or the power challenge individually, behind the meter, one company each doing its own thing. It's a systems problem. So we need to think, holistically. We need to think the grid, putting lots of power onto the grid, lots of resources, lots of different types, but fundamentally trying to, everybody kind of going and doing their own thing individually, extremely inefficient.
Completely agree.
When you look at other solutions, nuclear, we've seen France announce the 90 billion euros of investment this week. Yesterday, as we're in France, probably should talk about it. And a lot of that's related to the access to nuclear power. So is that, I think there's again, it's another podcast. You can go down the community aspect of it as well, and the perception of that side of power. Like what do people actually think? Do they understand it? I think is one question. But is nuclear viable as a solution?
The last European big nuclear projects, they all overshoot and are massively delayed. Let's start with that.
I think the UK will be building ours for decades and decades.
And
Exactly.
So we go back to what we were discussing before the podcast, the book, How Big Things Are Done. You have the bottom of the list, nuclear. It always overruns. It always gets delayed. So, I mean, there are a lot of people claiming that nuclear will see a new boom, and will be a solution. I'm not convinced. I haven't seen any evidence. Why is that so?
And it's been talked
I
about.
only have the opposite.
I've been doing this podcast for 5 years, nearly 6 years, and it's definitely been talked about the whole duration of that, and we haven't really progressed.
How many times has the nuclear fleet in France has had to be intervened by government in order not to die? At least 4. So
I'm optimistic. I mean, I think in time it will emerge as a viable solution, but I don't think it's going to be in this.
It was short-term solution.
The small modular reactor concept, I think, is a great avenue by which the technology can get commercialized, and we can get a lot of advantages of speed and scale and repetition in order to manufacture and bring down the costs and not be overrunning all the time. And yet ultimately, go back to what I just said, like individual companies trying to like solve this on their own with their own nuclear reactor, like, it's possible. It's not the most efficient solution. So we need more nuclear on the grid, quite frankly, and not a lot of kind of private wire nuclear.
To your point earlier, everybody wants to be connected to the grid. Yeah. So microgrids, nuclear power, or SMRs at least, are transitional.
Yeah.
It's the transition worth the investment.
It's a massive investment. It's a massive investment. Yeah.
Just if you price it just for the transition, how expensive running that data center would be. Insanely expensive. You need to pass that cost someone.
Yeah.
So you pass on to the final customer. So if people are already complaining that they're overshooting on token consumption and that their budgets on tokens are being evaporated on the first days of the month, if you multiply that cost by 5, does it make sense?
Yeah,
and that's the question. And that's the question that we need to ask. Nuclear can be a path. I agree with that. I'm an industrial engineer. I love the nuclear technology. I just haven't seen evidence of being cheap and meeting its deadlines. And that's what I'd love to be proven wrong.
Yeah. This probably brings us on to our next question perfectly as well, because we were talking about kind of power challenges. Are they the same in Europe as the US? Do we see the same things happening?
I think you can even break that down by country as well.
Yeah.
Like the UK has a very
I know. So it depends. You have some common themes at the top.
For sure.
But then as you start digging it up, even in the specific node, it's not the same problem as in another power node. So that idea that you could have a one size fits all solution falls apart. Now there are common themes. The affordability theme for the end customer, and if data centers coming into the grid will ramp up their cost bills, and they will if they only use power grids. So the bring your own power mentality is a great concept, and it should be pushed for. But as you said, as a holistic system, as everyone connected to the grid and contributing to the same, not as an isolated means. So that's the most common theme. But as you start coming down, like, Tolstoy used to say, all families aren't happy, but each family is unhappy on their own way. It's exactly the same thing. This is exactly the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, we are electrifying so quickly that capacity is being consumed, and so I think that is one of those high level things we see everywhere. I don't know of a single market where they're like, we're sitting there with like a plenty of capacity and like we're in a very tumultuous area where everybody wants to be. Why is nobody doing? It's like that doesn't exist.
No.
So I think capacity is a common issue. I think what's different is that we see, because of the large scale deployment of renewables across parts of Europe, like affordability is proving to be very closely connected to flexibility, I would say, in terms of if you have the ability to use power at certain times of day, you can have very low prices. And so that's emerging as like an awareness, I think, more here in Europe than we see in the US. Just because our grids just simply don't have as much renewable penetration for the most part as what we see across some of the markets in Europe.
And that's when you see like different use cases for different geographies. Like, we'll build our machine learning data center here.
Could be.
We'll build our cloud here.
Or we just think about storage in ways that
Exactly.
the load can be flexible. And
Which brings back to your first question: are we using the grid efficiently? And like you said, this phenomenon is not new. Peak shaving has been used by many industries in the past. The data center industry was not using it because they didn't need to.
Right.
But now that we're forced to rethink of solutions that already exist and be more efficient about it, peak shaving is amazing. It can lower your power bill, but you need to be smart about it.
And when you talk about community engagement, again, which will come up on every podcast we talk about over the next few days, because it's such a big topic now, that's how we can help change the perception of the industry, is from the utilization of power to benefit the community as well as the customer.
And that, again, coming from power, when I got into the data center industry, it was a shock on how little the data center industry does to break the myths that are created along communities. The power industry has been doing that for decades successfully. And we are, like you said, everyone is still trying to run their own thing instead of joining forces, and let's start demystifying. We're not here to increase your power bills. We're not here to drink all your water. We are more efficient than that. We know what we're doing. Let's show that. And I think the data center industry needs to be much more vocal and united in doing this.
And so that community engagement piece is more and more critical. More and more projects are being blocked.
Especially seeing it all the time in the US at the moment.
Certainly, for sure. I think one of the underlying challenges here is that we are a business to business type industry.
Yes.
And more than that, we're generally full of engineers. And so like we don't have the right DNA in most cases to show up and like listen to a community and talk about things that matter to them, because we're going to show up and talk about how evaporative cooling actually uses less water than a highly electrified data center. It's like, no, like people aren't going to understand our business the same way that we do. And so I think we have not done a great job, and we're still trying to make progress to find ways to meet people where they are and have the right conversations. And I think that power is one of these places that we can bring real value to the community. We can show up and say, we can make your grid more reliable. We can actually put downward pressure on pricing for you by putting more power on that existing infrastructure. Like we can do these things that impact the kitchen table economics that I think will make an impact to the community directly.
And if you go to communities where large power stations used to lie, whatever type of power, what you'll find is you'll find a willing community that understands economics of big infrastructure, and they understand the impact, especially if that power plant is about to be decommissioned. You have so many families which will lose their jobs, and the multiplying effect disappears. So, and that's why I was saying the power industry did a good job setting up that tone. We should use that. We should use some of those examples to relate better with the community.
It's interesting that you say that. I was out at TerraWolf in Buffalo, like literally 2 weeks ago. I mean, just the scale of what they're building there is just absolutely phenomenal, like absolutely incredible. It was really interesting to hear how, first of all, they've taken this old disused coal plant and reconverted it into renewable power. And then second of all, how the community surrounding that power station, like so many people lost their jobs, and they're a power business. So they just went and rehired it.
Of course.
And all of a sudden you hear this kind of, you begin to realize that actually there is a really good catalyst for change there. And to your point, Chris, like I think the industry's now increasingly mindful of this. I think that's one, we're a new industry. It's a really positive step forward, but certainly like Andy and myself have been talking about this for absolutely ages. Like how do we bring people together? It was one of the reasons we founded the DCMC initiative. Like how do you actually bring marketers, public affairs people, PR, comms people together to actually start addressing these problems on kind of a wider industry level, instead of everyone running into the same brick walls in silos, because ultimately everyone's trying to achieve the same goals. I think it's about being responsible and being open enough to talk about it and say, we haven't got it figured out.
Right.
And you'll find, what do you find with communities, which is the most interesting? And again, like you said, we're mostly of us are engineers and we completely fail at that. But when you start running the exercise, the most interesting thing that you'll find is that communities, most of them, they just want to be heard.
Like
They
listening
literally
to
just
them,
want to be heard.
you've got to
That's it.
listen to the community. I think that's a key part of this conversation. It's not about us telling communities what it's about, us listening to what their challenges are and solving their challenges. I think, again, that's what the industry's getting much better at. I think previously we just go into a community, tell them what we're going to do, tell them how they'll benefit, and they're like, hang on a minute. Like,
I actually got told off by when I was doing one of these community sessions and say, we're sick of companies who come here, say that they'll do big things, they buy an ambulance, they take some photos, they leave away, and there's nothing here. We don't even need the ambulance, we need other things.
Yeah. It's a good point. Less talk, more action. And publicity, to your point, shouldn't be used as kind of a vehicle just to kind of say achieve the objective that you're trying to achieve from a commercial level. Like, it actually needs to be responsible and leave something behind, so you create, I suppose, a legacy, the communities in which you're building it.
And be prepared to have that be something very local, very specific to the local community. There are many communities who might need that ambulance,
Exactly.
but don't assume that everybody does.
Right. Or at least not just one anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So guys, we are at time. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I have to ask you the marketing question. So just in terms of the event, what's really excited you so far and what you're looking forward to?
Well, it's just getting started, but the awards ceremony was last night. We won Best Global Data Center Operator of the Year for the second year in a row. So that's been the most exciting thing for us.
retained your title. Well done.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Multi-award winner now.
So it's been brilliant.
So it's just started, but it's I think the thing that has struck me the most is to see first of all how this conference is growing, but also how some small companies, and we were talking about one a few minutes ago, that 3-4 years ago they were tiny, and now they're massive. They're throwing a party on a yacht. I mean, the industry is growing a lot, and with it, you have new companies coming in, being very successful, and it's great to see them here.
Nice.
I think events are a great place to realise the scale of that growth, because we're all in it, we live it, we breathe it all day, every day. You don't really notice it too much, and you come back a year later and you realise there's double the amount of people. Yeah, there's another floor in the building, which I found out 10 minutes ago. I think the scale of this industry is not off the scale now. I think, and they're already forecasting bigger next year.
Are they really?
But enjoy the event. Thanks both for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for the
Thank you,
invite.
guys.
That's it for this episode of the Inside Data Center podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This show is brought to you by DataX and DataExec, the recruitment partners powering global talent across the data center and digital infrastructure world. If you enjoyed today's conversations, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the podcast community. Stay tuned for more stories, insights, and conversations with the people shaping the future of our industry.